Greetings and salutations, friend. Nice to see you again. I am Jeremy Tank, and if you are watching this, I am your brand guy. What does that mean? That means you already have somebody in your corner to talk about branding, your website, the words you say, the pictures that you show people, things that intrigue them and convey your full value with the world. I'm on your side. So this week I'm talking about the law of attraction, and one of the reasons the law of attraction is so powerful to me and so magnificent to me is because I believe that the vibration, the frequency of all of these concepts of your future, of the possibilities of what could be, are pretty much out there in the quantum field. It's the possibility of anything. And when you plan for a future, when you actually start engaging with it in the visioning, the imagination process, the creativity process, the consciousness of building something process, you're creating a vibration within yourself. And I love working with people to take that idea of the frequency, the vibration, and build that into a logo, build that into every single thing that goes into your business. So today, I want to share a couple of books, and we're going to go in a slightly different route because I've gone very broad, big-wise in the last few posts, and what that means is I've talked about the idea of quantum physics measuring like the smallest things, very smallest things in the universe, but that even as we're participating with the smallest things in the universe, it is the observation that actually brings it into reality. And that's the different points between a wave of possibility, the quantum wave, the quantum field, which is the possibility of everything, everywhere, happening all the time, and really the possibility of being a particle, which is you, me, atoms, molecules, my cat, which is right down there. It's all of these things that become solid to us and our reality as we are experiencing it. Now, the funny thing about that is that in a lot of these quantum physics experiments, energy is both the wave and the particle. And what is the difference? It's you. It's you seeing it, observing it, interacting with it, expecting it. And you, interesting enough, don't actually interface with it. It is your mind, because you convey photons through the eyes to the brain. Your brain, your mind, forms the picture of the things around you. Your touch is just conveying signals through your body to your mind. Smell, same thing. Taste, same thing. All the things that you experience and know as reality, as truth, as things that are solid right here and now, are really your mind's interpretation of inputs through electrochemical signals in all of you. So what does that mean? That means everything is out there all the time in possibility, and anything can be. And I love that Abraham Hicks calls us the vortex. Anything you want, anything you dream of, anything that you believe can be, should be, might be, is out there, good and bad. There is no real spectrum here. It's out there in the quantum field, and it's you and your expectation and your judgment, your contrast of it, that brings it into being. So that's the real big picture. I've covered in a couple different ways now. Now we're going to go dive into a different view of this, because the quantum field is awesome. And the idea that on the smallest levels our molecules, our atoms, our subatomic particles are vibrating. All it is just energy vibrating at super high rates. And that vibration seems to clash and create this great conundrum, a volcano of energy inside of you that creates what you are. But it doesn't explain how you get to be who you are and why you are. So I'm going to share a couple of books today over the next half hour that kind of express, at least to me, why we end up the way we are, why our perspectives are the way they are, and why it's so hard, so dang hard to break out of some of the stuckness and stagnancy that we experience. So the first book I'm going to share with you guys is called The Tao of Trauma by Elaine Duncan. And The Tao of Trauma is, you can see all these little post-it notes in there. It's because it's a brilliant book. And you may know, you may not know, my wife is a doctor of Chinese medicine and acupuncture. I ended up learning quite a bit just by osmosis of her going through her doctorate program. And what this book does is it actually walks a very nice line that is, oh, hey, Teresa, a very nice line that really describes the trauma response in terms of 5-element Chinese medicine theory, or how do they refer to it? Acupuncture and Asian medicine. It's really Chinese medicine theory. And what they do is they tie it in with the concept of the trauma response and polyvagal theory. So I'm just going to give you a little highlight of what polyvagal theory is, at least my understanding of it, so you can sort of understand how this works. Because I think that if you see some of it and you see how it actually kind of fits together, it'll start to make sense. Then when I introduce the next book, it's going to be something really dynamic for you. So polyvagal theory is this idea that you have a central nervous system, you have a peripheral nervous system, you have a autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is all the stuff that happens automatically within your body. You can't really consciously control it. It is very much subconscious, and it is very much driven by, just senses that you don't really recognize. And what happens in polyvagal theory is that the autonomic nervous system is broken down to the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is... the sympathetic nervous system is the one that's just sort of, see if I have this right, that's the fight or flight. That is something hits, and the thing is that the sympathetic nervous system is sort of all just, it's all go. It wants to go constantly. It wants to just fight or flight all the time. I mean, that's basic limbic programming, right? That's caveman. If something is triggered, it wants to be able to take off. You want to run away from saber-toothed tigers. You want to run toward a woolly mammoth, although you've got to be careful there. So the other part of this is the parasympathetic nervous system. Now that comes down to two different primary nerves, the ventral vagus nerve, which is down on the inside here, and the dorsal vagus nerve, which is down the backside. And those are sort of like soft brakes for the sympathetic nervous system. They try to temper that response, and every time you slightly get interested or slightly get drawn into that excitement and into adrenaline and dopamine and all those sorts of things, that's one of those nervous systems easing up and letting a little bit more of the sympathetic nervous system come through. Now, interesting, the ventral vagus nerve, this is right in here, is connected to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is the part of your brain that's really putting pieces together on a moment-to-moment basis and trying to communicate with the outside world, trying to put everything together to help you understand and plot and plan. And it's very, very much consciousness right here, what's happening. So in general, what happens is someone hits a position of fight or flight, and the ventral vagus nerve starts to connect with the prefrontal cortex, and maybe there's an opportunity to use our socialization. Maybe there's an opportunity to talk our way out of it. You know, this is fight, flight, fawn, or freeze. This is the fawn response. This is the evolution of the higher brain function, communication, conversation, trying to find a way out of potential trouble, trying to back down that fight or flight response. Fawning is really a way of using newer evolutionary skills to complement the older evolutionary skills of fight or flight. But what happens is that when the excitement starts to get too much, you get a little too excited, the ventral vagus nerve doesn't talk so well with the prefrontal cortex. And what happens is that you start to get really into fight or flight at that point. You either have to put up or shut up, right? So at some point, the sensory input gets too much for the ventral vagus nerve, and fight or flight is totally taking over. And that fight or flight response is going to cause you to do one of those two things. Well, if that gets to be too much and you are unable to either fight your way out or flight to run away, what happens is the dorsal vagus nerve is an emergency brake for this entire system. And that's the freeze response. And that could be fainting, that can be just like passing out. And so it's this whole stage of getting up to the point, and your last ultimate reaction of the brain is just shut it down, try to preserve as much as possible, limit blood flow to the extremities, vasoconstrictions, like limit blood flow, protect everything that's essential, and just let the person pass out and don't even face it. So the other day, yesterday, I think, I started talking about how between the ages of 0, even before you're born, and about 7, the brain is trained with a theta frequency, meaning it's very, very receptive to influence, to triggering, to discussion, to training. Really, this is an open opportunity for your brain to be trained. And the way that it gets trained is through this fight or flight response. And polyvagal theory explains that the subtle balance between the prefrontal cortex, the sympathetic nervous system, and especially the ventral vagus nerve, it all sort of has this balance and flow, so you get more excited. Maybe you talk your way out of it. If you've been in trouble, you know, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the prefrontal cortex just kind of shuts down, and then your fight or flight response has you yelling back at somebody because you're just so angry or you're so furious. And when that doesn't work, or if they threaten to beat you up, you gotta run away. This is how fight or flight works. Well, in this theta state, this is constantly happening because this is literally training your mind and your body how to work together best for survival. It is protecting you in survival. And the interesting thing about the Tao of trauma is it walks through this entire process of excitement and moving through these concepts. And then it adds a whole other layer, and I'll show you my diagram because I love to draw my little diagrams here. This is 5-element theory, and I have gone ahead and drawn the seasons and the elements, meaning stone. Metal is autumn. Okay, metal is where we start, into water, into wood, into fire, into earth, I believe. Earth, yeah, late summer. And these are all the seasons of the year. But the thing is that each of these tie in through the Tao of trauma with the idea of the different stages of fight or flight and the different stages of recovery of fight or flight. And I've actually kind of written this and encoded my own little drawing here so that I can understand it. And it ties the idea of fight or flight into different tissues within the body. For example, the metal, let's see, the metal in 5-element theory is the lungs and the colon. The water is the kidney and the bladder. The wood is liver and gallbladder. So they all have a different part and a different piece. And what's interesting is that Elaine Duncan used this idea to say, look, potentially, when we have these traumas as we're growing up that are teaching us how to be people in this theta state, that are teaching us the proper ways to do things, we are not consciously choosing the beliefs that allow us to survive that fight or flight, that slight fight or flight response. But that response is programming our subconscious mind through these tissues in essentially trauma response. So growing up is nothing but trauma. And that's kind of a joke, but it's not a joke, because that's what trains you to be a person. And the way you train to be a person is you do something, and then somebody tells you you're wrong, somebody challenges it, somebody corrects you, somebody pushes you, and you know, this is the sort of thing, maybe you go out and you see a dog and when you're 6 years old, and the dog snaps at you, and instantly you think, I hate dogs, all dogs are not friendly, I'm never going to be near a dog. You may not do that consciously, but the fear inherent in that action becomes embedded in your body within certain tissues, probably the liver, if I'm right. Seems like it's right. And what happens is that as you go further in life, you may not remember that event, but that event definitely has impact on your life. Perhaps you end up dating a man or a woman who has a dog, and all of a sudden that relationship's not working and you don't know why, but ultimately, subconsciously, your body is remembering that you made a decision, you made a choice that dogs were going to be dangerous for the rest of your life. And this is sort of how the decisions we make, even unconsciously, especially during this growth period, birth to like 7, really can drive behavior and beliefs far into adulthood. So the next book I'm going to show, the next book I'm going to introduce you to, it takes another tack of that. And this is a doctor who was doing research with, I believe it was clone cells and the tissues around that. And this is The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. And Dr. Lipton basically went on to to demonstrate, he wrote this book all about it, that cells are essentially tiny computers unto themselves. And this drives me right back to the ideas I was trying to bring up before, where if you look at Gestalt theory, the idea of the whole is different than the sum of the parts. And at every level of organization, the workings, the way that it comes together is different, but it creates a whole greater than what it is broken down. You are greater than just your organs, and your organs are greater than just the tissues, and the tissues are greater than just the cells. Well, it turns out that the cells are microcomputers in and of themselves. Within the cell walls are messenger proteins, essentially, so that whatever is on the outside of the cell, if it's nutrient rich, if it's supportive, if it's growth oriented, the cell can actually pull those proteins into itself and use those to activate greater metabolism, different reproduction of the DNA. It can actually modify DNA through mRNA, messenger RNA. And what that is it lays on top of a stack of DNA, and when the DNA is transcoded, it reads differently. It's essentially like putting Legos down. And this is just taking a chunk of Legos and putting them right on top of a piece of DNA. So as it goes through, it doesn't encode, or it does encode. It encodes differently. And this is what epigenetics is really all about, is the idea that the things in your blood make cells act differently. And that differently becomes a different combination of molecules, atoms, vibrations, frequencies. To add on top of that, Lipton basically said, look, there are sensors that are protein sensors in the cell walls. It's like a double layer of fatty cells, fatty proteins, fatty lipids that actually, that's what keeps the cell all together. And what he says is, look, there are sensors for light, there are sensors for electromagnetic frequencies. So your body is constantly getting feedback on things you aren't even recognizing. You don't even see signals from some place, some time, something around you that you are not even consciously aware of. And where are those signals going? Well, if a cell picks up one of these signals, then the signal comes into the cell via the protein, right? There's something that connects with that protein and causes it to create a transformation going into the cell, which then triggers usually multiple processes and puts out some sort of messenger protein that goes back out of the cell. And this isn't expressed in any of these books, but this is sort of how I understand it at this point. Those messengers, all of those signals from all throughout your body, from every cell in your body, trillions of cells, by the way. This is how complicated this is. Trillions of cells with their own feeling, their own sense, their own impression from, looking at this Chinese medicine stuff. Maybe the kidney is holding trauma in one place, the liver's holding trauma, your skin, your sinews, your muscles. Each of these hold different types of trauma depending on where in the trauma cycle they were interrupted or where in the trauma cycle they were able to complete. So all of these things form memories in your tissue. There's a little bit of a Hawaiian traditional medicine in that too, right? Hawaiian traditional medicine is very much about your body being your temple and your mind and honing these two in unity. Well, when you give these signals, these trillions of signals, what system is processing those signals? And I actually think it's this like limbic polyvagal system, because your cells pick up electromagnetic interference, it picks up light, it picks up heat, it picks up all these different things that you may not consciously be aware of, but it sends it up somewhere where it processes it in a way that starts to make you feel, notice the word feel here. So when it comes up, this is still not the conscious brain. This is still not something that is making an active difference to your logic centers. This is still limbic and midbrain. So what happens is these things come up from inside you, from all around you, from everything you are experiencing, and they come up as feelings. And by feelings, I mean like that kind of squiggly stomach, it just doesn't feel sure, kind of feeling. Or maybe it's feeling. Or maybe it's up. Like, maybe it makes you horny. I mean, traditional feelings that are governed by the limbic brain are survival-based, they are reproduction-based, and they are hunger-based. right? These are the three things that our limbic body, our reptilian brain wants us to do. It wants us to stay alive. It wants us to stay well. It wants us to get enough sleep. It wants us to reproduce. It wants us to eat. So a lot of the feelings in the body, usually whatever these triggers are, whatever these feelings are, come up. And remember, each of the proteins is a tightly wrapped bunch of molecules, atoms, which, as we break it down, is just tight bunches of vibration. It's just energy in tight little bundles vibrating, trying to carry signals, trying to carry messages of some kind to your awareness. So those come up, they hit the brain, you get sort of a feeling, a sensation, and it might be in your heart. You know, that seems to be where a lot of people feel things, is somewhere between the heart and the stomach. I'm not far enough back for you to see my stomach, but the heart and the stomach. And, you know, getting in touch with your feelings, getting in touch with your body, with your sensations, the metaphysics of you being you, has a lot to do with recognizing that your body is constantly sending you signals based on all of the information around you, based on everything you're experiencing, and it brings it up and it brings it to your awareness. And here's where I got stuck for a long time, because I like to study Buddhism, I like to study Zen, I like to study Hinduism. My mother was a minister and a doctor of esoteric studies, so I learned a lot of things. She preached a lot about global religions and the truth in religion and the way that things overlap in a lot of positive ways. And I grew up with that. And so I tend to look at this and I go, okay, I used to have this vision of enlightenment. And enlightenment, to me, used to mean essentially nirvana, right? When you've reached the point of being a Buddha, you somehow go out with your spirit, your soul, your essence, and you touch nirvana. And if you choose to come back, then you become bodhisattva. You become one who has reached enlightenment, and you've come back to teach others how to take that path. And then at some point, you decide that you want to go ahead and be a Buddha, and then you embrace enlightenment, you embrace nirvana, and you probably don't stay in your body, because at that point you're in nirvana. There's no point. You leave the cycle of, as Hindu has it, samsara, the cycle of life, the cycle of reincarnation, the cycle of progression and growth. You have reached a point where you can move beyond all of this stuff that is so messy and so dirty and suffering and pain. And that is the human experience, right? So that's the idea. And I always kind of got that confused. Enlightenment means you're Buddha, or enlightenment means nirvana. I actually, because of these two books, I'm sort of refreshing my concept of enlightenment, because there have been many people historically who write about enlightenment, who write about finding higher truths, who write about concepts that are tangentially tied in, and it makes you go, is this what they were experiencing? And of that, I think of Marcus Aurelius, you know, his writings on Stoicism, disconnecting the emotional body from the logical body. And I've done some more reading on that, and some more reading on Neo-Confucianism, and being a sage, and trying to understand the concept of enlightenment from essentially writings from thousands of years ago, because it's the way I can understand myself now, is understanding what they went through, and the fact that it is not that much different now. There have been dozens and dozens of different ways to describe this process, to describe what's going on within you, and to elevate yourself and to become enlightened. And sort of what I've landed upon is polyvagal theory mixed with this cellular theory, mixed with the brain theory, is sort of this concept that when we're going through all of this stuff, life, living, experiences, every one of us has the potential to become enlightened. But what enlightened means is not that you are walking on water. It does not mean that you think you are Jesus. It does not mean that you are just kind of doing crazy things. Enlightenment is really an element stepping up, where these sensations throughout your body go to your brain, and instead of acting on them, which is honestly caveman behavior. If you get upset at something and you immediately lash out, that is the limbic brain taking over. That is literally the particles of your brain telling your body how to be now. Now, we've talked about this before. In quantum theory, there's the wave, possibility, everythingness, and there's particle. And when we examine ourselves in the context of consciousness, consciousness is not located within the body. Consciousness, so far as we can tell at the moment, is sort of this esoteric energy field that filters into who you are because of the frequency of your body, because of the constant state of changes and growth and changes and growth, everything that's going on with who you are right now, what you experience, what you think, the way your body is. It's sort of funneling ever-loving consciousness into you in a way. And when you allow the body and the limbic brain to receive all of these signals, and that could be from somebody else, it could be from an environment, it could be from the words and pictures you are using with yourself in your own head. What happens, the mind can't ignore this stuff. It has to act on it in some way. Why? This is very caveman again. It wants to keep you safe. And the best ways to keep you safe are to keep you in situations that are familiar. The best way to keep you safe is to make sure that you don't step too far out of those bounds. And it keeps you safe by keeping a light foot on the brakes of the fight or flight response. It honestly, the body, the mind, subconscious and conscious, conscious and subconscious, really want to just stay living, keep this thing going. This is a good thing. We're alive. Why not keep it going, right? So it wants you to react right away. It wants to kick off things and keep going. And I sort of think that enlightenment, I think now, enlightenment is the concept that your body, the cells in it, the subconscious training from your youth, from your life, from everything that ever was a trauma response to you, creates familiarity. And that familiarity drives the responses, the familiar responses, anger, pain, anger, sadness, happiness. It drives these responses, and it triggers those sort of emotional proteins, emotional molecules, because emotion is really, it's the signals in the brain, the electrochemical signals that then send other signals throughout the body to say, feel this way, resonate with this energy. And becoming enlightened is really creating space between that automatic response, polyvagal response, subconscious response, everything that's going on, creating some space in there. And then allowing the mind, consciousness in general, but a moment for the mind to say, okay, what is the body experiencing? What am I experiencing? Separate me and the body just a little bit. Because in between that space is the quantum wave. When you react from the body, and you react in a fight or flight response in either direction, whatever that looks like, without thinking, just automatically, you're reacting in a very particle manner. You are very much in your body, of your body, letting it run your life. And when you pause just a moment and reflect on what's going on, when you listen to somebody, when you give space, when you allow a free flow of energy without stepping in and getting, we like to stomp in puddles. We like to put our fingers in and meddle with things, right? That way we feel like we've done our part. And I've sort of been finding with a lot of these books, with a lot of these perspectives, that we don't need to do that. That when we stop doing that, when we just give space, we are allowing particle to shift into wave. We are keeping open the reaction of what we could be doing, which honestly ends up looking like anger so much of the time. Why? Because it's based in fear. It's based in unfamiliarity. Unfamiliar is always scary because the body, the mind doesn't know how to deal with it, but the consciousness does. The consciousness that is within you holds on to that and says, okay, I can deal with unfamiliar. That is creativity. That is imagination. That is possibility. That is some amazing stuff. And it wants to go on with that. And it wants to grow to the best possible realm. Because you're here to experience life. And you can't experience life if you're living in fear about everything or living the common life. you have to step outside those bounds. And the consciousness knows that, and the consciousness wants you to experience that. And a lot of times we get stuck in body response. Again, I will reference Dr. Joe Dispenza's book, Being Supernatural, because he talks about that. That's the addiction to the body. That's the addiction to the physical, to the particle. And by elevating yourself, understanding just a little bit what's going on at the cellular level, it's getting triggers from all around. Every single cell gets triggers from all around you. And those are sent up. And that creates a response in your body, fight or flight, and tells you from a very caveman perspective, you need to do something. Do it now. Make it big. Make it grand. Do something. But when we step back, maybe we reach a little enlightenment. Maybe we allow that consciousness to come through. We create some space. We create greater opportunity. Because when you allow that space, suddenly your mind can say, what should be going on here? What would be the best way for me to proceed in whatever this situation is? Because the way it's going right now, my body wants to create an outrageous reaction. It's a very particle response. And when you create that kind of response, you'll notice that the world is a mirror. The universe is a mirror. You'll create that response. You throw it out into the world, and others respond with like in kind. That's the law of attraction in action. You throw it out there, and everything you put out is magnified and given right back to you. That's the primal response. But if we use consciousness and we choose to embrace something that is not fear-based, we choose to embrace something that is full of possibility, that is full of awareness, that is full of grace. It's called love, right? If we choose the idea, the concept of love, just openness, willingness, allowance, that is the wave of life. That is the waves of energy that we are living in, surviving in, drowning in, that we may or may not actually perceive. That is the vortex that is around you, that is waiting to bring great stuff into your life. So that's all I've got for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions, go ahead and just comment down below, and I will respond, I swear, to anything anybody posts. And tomorrow I will come back and talk a little bit more about the law of attraction from a slightly different angle. And I'm adding all of this up to on Friday, talking for all of this time about one book, which is Reality Transurfing, which takes a lot of these different concepts and wraps it in a shell that, well, let's just say if you hold on to traditional material physics, it kind of trashes that a little bit. And honestly, that's okay. We're beyond that. So if you like this stuff, if you are a business owner or somebody who is building a business, somebody who wants to build your brand, somebody who wants to do something grand and meaningful with it, and you want to utilize this vision setting, this frequency, this amazing dynamic wavelength in your business for you so that your business and you can benefit from the law of attraction, this is what I do. I help people out. My program is called Manifest Design, where it's an eight session deal where we talk about your vision, your brand, your customers, your competition. It's very much a branding strategy program. But at the end of it, I also help with rapid transformation therapy. RTT is a hypnotherapy, sort of using NLP, psychoanalysis, hypnotherapy, all in one little session to help you break through subconscious blocks. Why the subconscious blocks? As I've explained in this video, the subconscious blocks are the things that got you even before you were born to the age of 7, that your cells in your body, the different tissues in your body are holding on to. And there are times that this prevents you from doing something, to becoming more of what you want to be. And by helping just release this energy, you feel it, you touch it, you release it. And feeling is healing. It allows you to be whole and open. Because in the cycle, the 5-element cycle, the metal is not just metal. It's like stone. It's the beginning, but it's curiosity. The beginning of 5-element theory is curiosity, leaning in, trying to figure out how things are. And that's what I do. And the nice thing about that element is that when it's done right, when you learn the lessons, when you embrace that energy and then release it, and you learn what you actually, the decision that you made unconsciously at one point in time, it changes that metal to a gem. And you are that gem. And it's a shame for any kind of element, energy, blockage to be holding you back from everything you can be. And I would love to help you in whatever you're doing. Transform that rock into a gem so that you shine. Take care.